Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Double 18 Podcast live stream. I'm your host, Stephen Nagishi, and we apologize for the a bit of a technical difficulty because I know we posted on my X that we're going to go live at the top of the hour, but the computer problems forced me to switch to another one, so that took a little bit of time. And my sincere apologies to my tonight's guest. We've had him on our show previously over a little bit, probably a year ago, to discuss about the Chicago Bears, and we certainly have a lot to talk about now with the firing of Matt Eberflus and the appointment of interim head coach Thomas Brown. It is the Jacob Infante, the lead draft analyst for WindyCityGridiron, part of the SB Nations, and also you could follow Jacob on his X at Jacob Infante. Jacob, good evening, and I appreciate you coming on tonight in such a busy schedule.
Yeah, no, I mean, I appreciate you having me. It's been a little bit, so it's nice to be able to come back on the show.
Awesome. Well, we got a lot to talk about, certainly. Hopefully, you had a wonderful Thanksgiving with you and your family out there in the St. Louis area. Yeah. And obviously, the bombshell, of course, happened the day after Thanksgiving. And Matt Eberflus is finally gone. And I got to tell you, it doesn't look good on the context of things about how they fired Eberflus, even though it was the right move. And unfortunately, even though it was the right move, the way they handled it kind of got overshadowed. And people are really, really up in arms about the dysfunctionality of the organization, as well as the, if any coaches would, avoid joining the Chicago Bears, or even much less taking the interview. So, Jacob, let's start with the firing of Eberflus. This was a long time coming. This had been building for quite some time. First of all, are you surprised that the Bears actually did this? And second of all, what do you think of all the firing, the Zoom conference, and then the firing after the Zoom conference, and all that the disastrous handling?
Yeah, I mean, I think anyone can agree that the firing needed to happen. Honestly, I'm a little surprised they did it. I was getting into that. Oh, the Bears haven't fired a head coach midseason in over 100 years, something like that. So I was starting to get in that mindset. I didn't think they'd do it till after the season. I'm glad they did it now. I think part of it, comes down to someone tweeted this. I don't remember who it was, but someone sent out like 40 million people ended up watching 105 years 40 million people ended up watching that Thanksgiving Day game between the Bears and the Lions.
That means the rating, I believe today it came out as 37.4, something like that. So.
Okay, so that's still a good couple dozens of millions of people who watched one of the most comically, just one of the most comical, disastrous coaching time management examples that we've seen in recent NFL history. And I think time and time again, it's become a point where the Bears have been a laughingstock at the league the last couple of weeks, just because what funny way are they going to find a way to lose next? And without fail, every single time they'd find a new way to lose. Mm-hmm. So I think as far as the firing goes after the Zoom, I mean, sure, logistic wise, it's not an amazing look to trot a guy out there for a press conference thinking he still had his job, and then a couple hours later to fire him. I mean, it's an interesting way of going about things. I don't care too much about it. I mean, I feel like you're getting paid, millions of dollars a year. This is a very high stakes job, and to be in this sort of role comes plenty of criticism, especially in a market like Chicago. So I'm not necessarily too worked up about that, honestly. I just think that maybe they could have done it a little differently, but it's it was long overdue. Honestly, I think this has been. I think they should have done it last offseason, but especially the last couple of weeks, there are plenty of times where you could point to and be like, hey, this is a good time to, just cut your losses. And I think that, heading into a mini bye here where they play on Thursday and they don't play again until the next Sunday, I think that's a good opportunity for Thomas Brown to, get his bearings around him. But yeah, I mean, I just think the move in general is long overdue.
Yeah, it had to be done. I think the way the players were constantly bitching and moaning or even complaining almost every week on their, Jalen and, of course, DJ have their regular appearances on 670 The Score in Chicago. Mm-hmm. Paul Kmet does his regular guest appearance on CHGO as well. It's always about, the losses and how they lost and, the coaches, this and that. For me personally, I'm not a well-versed in football as you are, Jacob, and I've long complained about Matt Eberflus on the post-game show on both 670 The Score and ESPN Chicago.
Yeah.
Is that how I remember Matt Eberflus is pretty much somebody who really never took the accountability very, very seriously. And that's a big problem for me as somebody, you work in corporate world as I do, and so do I. And I think people, who is following our channel and thankfully, watching this right now, is also, work in some capacity and maybe work for a shitty boss or shitty colleagues who, stab people in the back, whenever the opportunity arises. And the level of disdain that the players showed toward this head coach and the coaching staff, and the fans, like myself, with all due respect to Matt Eberflus and his family, there isn't really that much of a sympathy towards the man himself,
No.
Because, like I said, he never took the accountability very, very seriously. And it's always about, we, not me, not I, when he also spoke. And whenever he spoke, I know a lot of people, had enough of him, with a bunch of word salad and make you lose your brain cells and all that stuff. But certainly, that's how I'm kind of going to remember Matt Eberflus as somebody who, 3 years, 14 and 32 overall record at the time of the firing. What is it? 5 and 18, something like that, within the 5 and 19 within the division or something like that. Yeah. That is just completely unacceptable. How are you going to remember Matt Eberflus's time here in Chicago? And do you think that he's kind of, surpassed maybe Mark Trestman as probably the worst coach in Chicago Bears history?
I'll remember him as the greatest tanking head coach of all time because he, with a lot of his teams, especially the last 2 years, but even the last, the first year he was there, they played tough at a lot of close games. They just couldn't seal the deal. They could never step up when it mattered most. They could never close out the victory. And I think that that's going to be his legacy as someone who, when the lights got bright, he shut down. And I think you're right with the accountability perspective. Yeah. He just continually being like, hey, we need to execute better. I think we made the right decision. Even if you don't think that, just be like, hey, I screwed up here. I made the wrong decision. And go from there. You don't throw your players under the bus. That's not how,
right.
That's not what a good leader is. A good leader is someone who steps out in front and, is willing to take that criticism, willing to take that accountability. And it's, I don't know. I think he's a good defensive coach. I think he's a bad head coach. I don't think that he's the type of person who should be managing, late game situations. I clearly don't trust him managing the clock. And I think he'll land somewhere. Yeah. I think he'll land somewhere as a defensive coordinator and he can stick around for a while because those Bears defense more often than not were pretty good Eberflus. But yeah, I think that as far as Trestman goes, that's an interesting one because it's both pretty bad locker room culture. I'd say Eberflus is a little bit better than Trestman, but even then, I mean, you could go either way because Eberflus, his defenses were really good, his offenses were bad, and Trestman is the other way around. I think that maybe it was the fact that I think Trestman had better rosters to work with and failed in his 2 seasons compared to Eberflus's first 2 seasons. But I mean, at the end of the day, Eberflus had a really good team and couldn't get the job done this year.
By the way, thanks to Nicholas Selby, they only won 2 divisions. Only 2 of them came last year. 0-6 in his first year, 2-4. Again, those 2 wins coming against the Vikings and the Lions last year. So 2-4, and then 0-3. So that's like 2 and 13 against the NFC North. 5-19, as I said, was I think his overall record with the 1 scoring game. So Nicholas, thank you very much, and I apologize for the clarification there. So now Thomas Brown takes over as the interim head coach for the next 5 games. And, there's so many conflicting reports out there right now in regards to, the Bears head coaching candidacy. And we're going to kind of revisit the press conference yesterday about Ryan Poles' role in all of this. I know Ian Rappaport said on Sunday, which he kind of insinuated that Kevin Warren's the guy that's calling the shots or making a final call on that hiring, which thankfully, at least, they clarify that, it is Ryan Poles is, the guy. He is still the lead man for the job. And I think Warren's role will probably more than likely is that, help me out here, Jacob, but this could be where I think Warren, who is a experienced NFL executive before he went to college as a Big Ten commissioner.
Yeah.
And he also has a great knowledge within the NFC North division, having worked in Minnesota and Detroit in the past. And what people forget was he was also an executive when they won the St. Louis Rams, now the Los Angeles Rams again, won the Super Bowl in that 1999 season. So he does have connections both in the league as well as outside the league, in college.
Yeah.
What kind of role do you see Warren playing? And like maybe vetting the candidate a lot better. And a lot of people are kind of like up in arms and angry about the Warren kind of like being front and center in all of this. Personally, I have no problem with Warren getting involved a little bit more, which I think people are a little bit upset because obviously, number one being that the lack of progress being made in the stadium. And I don't think that this is Warren kind of getting his, sticking his head or foot or whatever you want to call it, trying to divert the attention from that, the job that he is hired to do. Do you have, what were your overall impressions of the Poles body language that's kind of being discussed a lot, as well as the Warren kind of like being a little, more proactive in helping, Poles get the best guy in this search?
Yeah, so I think that obviously, I mean, everyone's talking about, the body language, the demeanor of Poles, and I think it's not, great, not a great look. It comes down to that same accountability. He could have stepped forward and be like, I'd take responsibility and be like, this is what I learned, from this mistake. This is how we're going to, improve it in the, going forward. I think Warren should be involved in the search, but ultimately it should be Poles' decision, 100%. And
I kind of feel that way too. I don't think Warren's the kind of guy that I think people need to kind of clear their head about Warren's position. He's not the guy who's like football operations guy.
Yeah,
he's not the GM first and foremost.
Mm-hmm.
He's not the one making the draft picks. I don't think people need to mix up Kevin Warren with people like, say, Jerry Jones or somebody else for that matter. So I think that needs to be completely removed from their head once and for all. I know a lot of people are upset with the stadium progress, and I know there have been some idiots out there, using the alias on X or whatever, using the, less than flattering languages, to describe Warren as well as Poles. Racial undertone there I've seen a little bit, unfortunately. But I do believe that the Warren getting a little bit involved is, in a way of supporting Poles, because, let's be honest, I think from my personal opinion, Poles looked like he got really, really humbled in this, search. We know that the search was led by, Bill Polian, and Ted Phillips was the, the guy who was involved for the one last time, unfortunately. And the list of the candidates from that they pick, Dan Quinn,
Jim Caldwell,
and Matt Eberflus. And that wasn't exactly a stellar list of candidates. And then yet still polls decide to pick out of that list. And then we all know the influence of Trace Armstrong, the former Bears defensive end, who is now one of the powerful agents out there that represents the coaches and front office people. And that, cronyism is a big of a problem. So I hope that Warren can, tap into his vast experience and the network to at least say, look, you need to expand your candidates. You need to, vet these people to make sure that you're not vetting this guy because you're emotionally attached, which is a problem we've seen with, the Hard Knocks, him crying over Adrian Colbert, cutting him, his emotional ties, or at least being too emotionally attached to players like Velus Jones as well, so there is some stuff that I think maybe Ryan Poles himself probably learned from this experience, and maybe he was just, embarrassed, and how the whole thing turned out. It's not just with Matt Eberflus, but also with the hiring of Shane Waldron. That was also very, very controversial because, again, Waldron was represented by, Trace Armstrong. What do you think about the Poles getting another shot, and then maybe perhaps this was a humbling opinion for him? Do you see it that way?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that there's a good amount of, I think there's reason for the Bears to want to keep Poles around. I think that the improvement in this roster, as when you compare not just veteran talent, but young talent as well, compared to what the Bears had going on in 2021 and Ryan Pace's last year, and then going into 2022, the stuff he inherited was really bad. And I think that Poles has put this roster in a good place, not a perfect place. Obviously, I feel like, the offensive line and the defensive line have remained issues, but the receivers have gotten a lot better. The linebackers have gotten a lot better. The secondary has gotten a lot better, just to name a few. So I'm fine with keeping Poles around for this. I think the fact that you have a GM in place, I don't see the need to bring in any outside consulting, because Ernie Accorsi, if you remember when the Bears,
right, for the John Fox hiring, yes,
the John Fox hire, that was a buddy of Ernie's. They've been tight for however long, time going way back. I want to say John Fox was on the Giants coaching staff or just something like that. And then obviously Bill Polian. I mean, 2 of his 3 candidates have ties to the Indianapolis Colts, and he was the GM of the Colts. I mean, I hardly see that as a coincidence. Eberflus wasn't looked at super highly as a head coaching candidate. Jim Caldwell certainly wasn't looked at highly as a head coaching candidate. So I'm good on outside consulting. There's no purpose in bringing anybody. I think this is Ryan Poles needs to run the show. Kevin Warren wants to get involved. He can provide insight here and there, but this needs to be Poles' decision. So yeah, I think that this is something where this needs to be on Poles. And I I'm maybe a bigger fan of his than others on, in this space, but I think, the pressure's on now and he needs to ace this head coaching hire, at least, make it to the playoffs multiple times because there's such a high, I don't know. I feel like when you have a quarterback like Caleb Williams and you have some of the assets, the cap space, some of the draft capital you have, it's probably going to be 3 picks in the top 40 again this year.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's, it's going to be an enticing head coaching job, that and the market itself being head coach of the Chicago Bears. But yeah, this is something that I'm fine with them keeping polls, but they definitely need to turn the temperature up on his, on his seat a little bit.
Mm-hmm. My guest tonight is Jacob Infante, the lead NFL draft analyst with the Windy City Gridiron, part of the SB Nation Network. Thanks for joining us once again. We are closing in on almost 1,000 people. Really appreciate it. I know a lot of draft questions are being popped up, and we'll get to that in a little bit as we try and wrap up about the Thomas Brown and the head coaching candidacy. So Brown is, is somewhat considered a legitimate head coaching candidate. He's interviewed with Texans, the Dolphins, and also, I believe, the Titans about a year or two within that span. Are you kind of concerned about Brown's rapid ascent from passing game coordinator to OC and now the interim coach, or do you see this as a legitimate opportunity for Brown to kind of prove himself? If you're going to be a head coach, this is your opportunity. I know 5 games is unfortunately maybe not enough sample size, and if Ryan Poles had the green light to fire Eberflus, that is, after that pathetic Patriots game, which me and Rashab Shakiri was actually in attendance that day. Do you feel like Brown is a legitimate head coaching candidate? And if so, what do you want to see him to in the next 5 games to say, yeah, that's a guy that I would seriously consider?
So I wouldn't at all be surprised if Thomas Brown ends up being a head coach someday. Mm-hmm. I don't think that's going to be in 2025. And just the reason I say that is, obviously I've been impressed with his, 3 games as a play caller. He stepped in really well for Shane Waldron once they fired him as offensive coordinator. And, coming from that, that Sean McVay tree, he was highly touted. He got hired as the Panthers offensive coordinator. But the way I see it is the sample size of good as a play caller just isn't there for me to put him above a Ben Johnson, a Liam Cohen, somebody who, called plays really well with the Bucs this year, called plays really well with Kentucky when he was their offensive coordinator. And someone who's been an offensive coordinator for the Rams as well. We'll get into head coaching candidates in a little bit, but I think with Brown, you're looking at, he was the play caller for part of the season with the Panthers last year, where they were the worst team in the NFL.
Right.
And then he got his duties taken away from him. And
Bryce, you hold that against him?
Not too much, but it is something I factor in, just because of the fact, look, he's called 3 good games as offensive coordinator of the Bears. Mm-hmm. And, to me, that's not a big enough sample size to anoint him necessarily when you have bigger sample size from his time with the Panthers. Yeah. That wasn't good. And you also factor in the play where they're still below league average. I'd have to pull up the post, but I went to go check. Thomas Brown is in the bottom half of these last 3 weeks. He's in the bottom half of offensive points per game these last weeks. At least the Bears are. So granted, there's a lot of context that needs to come into that. Some of that comes down to, the head coaching situation. I want to see what he can do as the head coach, as a game manager. I think that's going to be a big test for him to be able to show, all right, I can separate myself from this disaster that's been happening with Eberflus, where it's bad decision after bad decision. I mean, if they win a couple games, then sure, I definitely give him an interview. But realistically, I mean, you're looking at some of the teams they're facing. They've got, the Lions again, the Vikings again, the Packers again, the Seahawks, the 49ers. I mean, that's not an easy schedule
No.
It's quite a difficult one actually. So
Yeah.
I don't see them finishing that with a record above 500
Right.
in the
I
remaining.
think that's pretty much out of the question at this point.
Yeah, for the rest of the season. And I can't sit here in good conscience and say, hey, I think that, this guy who went, 1-4 as an interim head coach, he's the guy, I've seen enough, bring him in as the head coach. So I can't in good conscience do that regardless.
No. I think that's pretty much out of the question. And 1-4 would not be suffice. Even if things look a little more competent, under Brown. And because, Eberflus was such a bad coach, the bar has been set low. And, you and I could easily clear that bar together, or at least one of us. Yeah. But, I think you're going to have to see a lot more from Brown. Maybe like a, say, 3-2 record, for example, if the team is really, really jacked up and they're excited. And of course, let's be honest, players wanted this to happen. Players, maybe forced them to tie their hands and then decide that, we need to have like some sort of a mutiny on and off the field to make it happen. And then it didn't happen, and we got to thank, Jalen Johnson for, having the guts and the courage to, yell at Matt Eberflus to finally force the hands. And in a way, the Bears finally moved away from their long-standing tradition, even with the bad, the publicity of firing Eberflus after the Zoom meeting notwithstanding. So maybe this is an opportunity for the Bears to, finally, get their head out of their own asses, for the lack of better terms, to do something completely different. They already did it, with the firing of Eberflus. And now, the wholesale change it cannot stop from there. You don't need to have Jalen Johnson or somebody else blow up to say, oh shit, we got to do something different. So hopefully this is a start of something new where, whether we like it or not, Warren and also Poles leading the sweeping charges for the better. And, hopefully they'll do a thorough search of the head coaching candidates. And we'll get to the head coaching candidates now, since, we've seen a lot of names being thrown around. Okay, give me. I'm going to throw in some names, and you will say yes, no, or maybe. Okay. Number one, Bill Belichick.
Maybe.
Okay.
I'm just saying maybe with Bill Belichick. I feel like, I believe he's the greatest coach in NFL history.
Yeah.
I also believe that part of that was off of what he did 10, 15, 20 years ago.
And with Tom Brady too. So
of course. Yeah. So, and when you take a look at some of those teams after Tom Brady left, the Patriots didn't really do a whole lot. So it begs the question, especially now, Bill Belichick's over 70. Is he going to want to get involved with a new quarterback? I don't know. I feel like he
doesn't seem to like Caleb Williams from many people's opinion or impression.
Yeah. He's done media appearances, hasn't talked incredibly highly about him. I'd be surprised if he is super into this opening. I also feel like he's going to want a little bit more control in terms of the decision-making of the roster. In fact, you have Ryan Poles as the GM. Is he going to want to be able to give up, power to Belichick? I don't know.
Yeah.
I feel like off of name alone, he's someone you have to consider, but he's not, pushing all the cards, all the chips on the table for.
Cliff Kingsbury.
No.
Okay.
No. I think that we saw what happens with him and, majority of the time in Arizona.
Okay.
Start off hot and you fall apart. And, there's one winning season in, with a team that went pretty hardcore, especially down the stretch to make that deep playoff push. And then things fell apart. You're looking at Washington now, started off hot, cooling down a little bit, had a good game last week, but that was 3 losses in a row, 3 stinkers.
Right.
I don't know. I can't look at, one, the logistics of, hey, this guy wasn't good enough to be our offensive coordinator. but now all of a sudden he's good enough to be our head coach 1 year later. Something about that doesn't add up, but
right. And they passed him on the OC job, so it would be kind of like, wait, you passed him for an OC job, and now you could interview for the head coaching job? That doesn't add up at all.
Yeah, no, 100%.
Okay, Joe Brady.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
I know he's a hot candidate, but obviously his time with Carolina was also was not well received at all. But
yeah, and I think that's the difference between Thomas Brown and, at least in my opinion, and Joe Brady is Joe Brady's been the play caller in Buffalo this entire season. He has a larger sample size. Even then, in Carolina,
didn't he take over last year as well when Ken Dorsey got fired?
Yeah. I don't remember what week that was, but yeah, he was he stepped into that offensive coordinator role,
Right.
and the Bills have been playing really good football. I think that he's not my top choice. I'll clarify that. I think that obviously the time in Carolina, Carolina's where head coaches go to die or whatever. So I think that's going to have some questions that need to be answered, but that also was farther ago than Thomas Brown's stint in Carolina.
Right.
I keep coming back to, I look at, he's still, a young guy. He's seen a good amount of success. He saw it at LSU.
Yeah.
Carolina didn't work out too well, but he's bounced back really well during his, year and a half or whatever in Buffalo. So he's someone I'm interviewing for sure. And
a question from Philip Charles. You're not high on John Gruden at all, right?
So here's the thing. I don't think he's going to go back to the NFL. I don't think he will.
You think that scandal is too big of a
I think so.
stain mark?
I think it is. And yeah, so he's a great football mind. I think he can still be a really good coach in the NFL, but I don't think the league's going to pull the trigger on him. I don't think he's going to leave his gig at Barstool right now. But at the same time, I think that there's definitely some baggage there. So yeah, I don't think he's going to get a head coaching job at least this cycle. I mean, maybe later on there's going to be some, rumblings, whatever. We'll see. Great football mind. I just don't think he's, I don't think he's going to get a shot.
Mm-hmm. Mike Brable, it seems like he's one of the top 2 or 3 candidates out there. What are your opinions on him?
Yeah, so it's interesting because I'm pretty heavy on, I like to have an offensive head coach.
Yeah.
But honestly, Vrabel's someone I'm looking at. I think that he overachieved with some Titans rosters that weren't necessarily amazing.
Right.
I think a lot of it's going to have to come down to the staff that he can build, because when he had Arthur Smith as the offensive coordinator, things looked fantastic. Down the stretch, when I think it was Todd Downing was the offensive coordinator, things didn't work out as well.
Right. And then before Smith, I think was it Matt LaFleur that was on the staff too?
I think so. Actually, I think, yeah. LaFleur,
the current Packers coach, right?
I think a year. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd be interested in hearing the staff that he'd be able to put together. I think that he's a good leader. At least he seems the case. He's good motivator, smart football mind. It's just a matter of, okay, do you want to go in the offensive coordinator? Do you want to go with a retread, somebody who, left Tennessee on a down note and really got fired? He's someone I'm interviewing. I'm definitely interviewing him. Again, not my top choice.
Yeah.
But I feel like if gun to my head, if the Bears absolutely have to take a defensive-minded head coach, then Vrabel's probably the guy that I'd pick.
Mm-hmm. And I know there have been some people chatting about Bucs OC Liam Cohen.
Yeah.
You seem to be very high on him. Can you tell us more about him and why?
Yeah, so I think that it comes down to the philosophy, but also not just the the schematic philosophy itself, but also the play calling capabilities. I think you watch Tampa Bay. It's just, it's a solid offense, personnel wise. It's not elite. It's not bad, but I do think that Cohen's doing a really good job of maximizing it. I think that he's shown at Tampa, he knows when to call what plays. He knows how to mix things up, how to keep his running backs fresh. I mean, you're seeing Rashad White, Bucky Irving, getting a good rotation going. And I think that rotation is really getting the best out of, especially Bucky Irving. He's just coming off of a fantastic game. He's been good this rookie year.
Right.
And I think that Baker's looked good this year. I feel like he's never been bad. I feel like, even when he got traded from the Browns, he was always better than a lot of people thought.
Yeah.
But he's not elite, but the Buccaneers offense is producing. They're looking good. I think that Cohen for a lot of it comes down to a play calling perspective. He knows, I think the difference between someone who comes from the McVay tree, Shane Waldron, I don't think Waldron's scheme was bad. I just think that his play calling was bad. You can have all these good plays, but if you don't know when to use them, then it's not going to matter. So I think that's something that's going to be, I think that Cohen does a lot better job at than Waldron, and some other offensive coordinators out there. A lot of, there's some offensive play callers who are head coaches. But I think out of the offensive play callers around the NFL who they could make a move for, I think Cohen's near the top. And I'm a fan of what he did in Kentucky. I always thought Will Levis was just okay. He made him look a lot better than I think he actually was in Kentucky. And I think that, I want to say it was one of those last 2 years.
2022 or something like that, right?
Yeah. So I think it was Levis's second to last year. Cohen was there, and he looked really good. Had a little bit of a down year once Cohen left. So
right. Cohen's from the McVay tree as well. Was he with the Rams as well, right? I think.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. That makes sense. If you get Liam Cohen and maybe keep Thomas Brown as the OC, or at least some sort of a offensive staff, then at least you have the the 5-game sample of from working with Caleb, and you could still probably build upon that if Caleb wants to continue working with Thomas Brown there. I know a couple of names being that was out of probably less than zero chance of happening, but somebody mentioned, I think it was Mike Florio today on 670, and even I think Trevor Sikkema from his YouTube channel, NFL Stock Draft Exchange, I believe, with Connor Rogers. They both mentioned going big, trading for Kyle Shanahan. First of all, is that feasible? And second of all, if San Francisco says, all right, give me a price, what would you give them?
See, that's really tough because there haven't been that many head coaching trades.
The last one I think is Sean Payton. I think.
Yeah, Sean Payton. I think that ended up being like a first rounder or something. I think Kyle Shanahan, if you can give up a 2026 first rounder, I'd do that. I think that the 2025 is going to be too high for my liking. I'd be interested for sure. I think Shanahan's one of the best in the business going today. I don't know the likelihood of it happening. But, realistically, the 49ers, a lot of guys are getting hurt. They're going to have to make a decision about, hey, are we going to pay Brock Purdy? If so, the roster is going to look a lot worse in comparison just because we can't afford so many guys. It's going to put a lot of pressure on us to draft insanely well. So I don't know. I don't think that they'll trade him, but I definitely be open to it. It's one of the top head coaches in the NFL for a team that's had a lot of coaching instability. And I think that Kyle Shanahan could do wonders with Caleb Williams. You're also seeing Shanahan's really well connected from people his dad worked with, from people he's worked with. We're seeing like Mike McDaniel, D'Amico Ryans, Robert Saleh have all gotten head coaching gigs, and they've all performed really well during their time with the 49ers. So I don't know. That's something I haven't done a ton of thinking about. Like if I get a quantifiable price, I'd trade for Kyle Shanahan, but he's good enough to the point where I'm not ruling it out, which I think is in most cases I wouldn't consider trading for a head coach, but in Shanahan's case, I'd certainly consider.
And Philip has also just posted a question. The same thing can be asked about, Sean McVay himself, because I know he's been making a lot of noises in the past about wanting to leave the game and then decides to come back and so forth. Obviously, that act ain't going to endear himself too long. And, Matt Stafford getting up there in age. I don't think he would be somebody who wants to stick around for the total rebuild.
No.
If McVay and Shanahan are both available for equal price, who would you take?
That's a tough one.
Let me just say this. If I'm Ryan Poles, here's what I'm going to do. I'll offer you 2025 second round pick, one of the two that the Bears have.
Yeah.
Then the 2026, maybe a second rounder that becomes a first rounder if the Bears do make the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
And then maybe I'll throw in 2027, say third round pick if the Bears do make the playoffs in the 2026 season. I don't want to keep giving up number one capitals.
Yeah.
If the Bears are picking like in the way low 20s. It's still drafted as draft. So yeah. What would you do?
That's a tough question.
Mm-hmm.
If I had to do Shanahan, McVay pitted against each other, I'd lean McVay. I think part of it is the fact that, he's won a Super Bowl. They both made it to 2 Super Bowls, but McVay's won 1. Shanahan has as good of an offensive mind he is. He's really good at getting his teams to the playoffs and getting them to succeed in the regular season and make deep runs in the postseason. But, we've seen a couple instances where he's blown leads. One going back to when he was the offensive coordinator at Atlanta, but also when he was, head coach of the 49ers, he blew an 11-point lead to the Chiefs or something like that late in the game. So, again, no hate on Shanahan. I'm not saying that that's disqualifying for absolutely not. Don't have him in Chicago. I think he'd be an incredible get, but I'd very slightly lean McVay.
Okay. My guest tonight is Jacob Infante, the lead draft analyst with the WindyCityGridiron.com. Also follow him on Twitter at Jacob Infante, one word. Let's get to the draft, which is obviously your specialty. At this point, we all know that the Bears pretty much have to focus on both sides of the trenches, the O-line and the defensive line. How would you rank the order of need for the Chicago Bears right now? Top 4 needs for the Bears.
Yeah, so I'd currently rank it. It's a little bit tough to distinguish guard and center, so I'll just do number 1, interior offensive line. I think that's the biggest need the Bears have on their roster right now. Number 2,
defensive tackle.
So I was torn between defensive tackle and defensive end. I'll go defensive tackle number 2 and defensive end number 3. And then number 4, there aren't too many glaring ones, honestly. I think Braxton Jones and Darnell Wright is a good offensive tackle duo. I don't think you need to move on from either of them this year. Mm-hmm. These last few weeks, I'm starting to get concerned about cornerback number 2.
Yeah.
Tyreek Stevenson's poor play.
Yeah.
Look,
I don't think Terrell Smith has done enough to, line up next to Jalen Johnson himself either.
Not yet. I think there's been flashes, but, there's still a little bit of a question mark there. I think that, I don't think they're going to make a big move at corner, but it's something to watch where, Jalen Johnson's playing really good ball. Kyler Gordon's playing really good out of the slot. Stevenson is pretty clearly he's the liability at the cornerback position. So year 2 hasn't played out the way that I've been hoping for him, that I'm sure that the Bears are hoping for him for, a variety of reasons. So I'd make that as the 4th biggest need. I could see safety in there as well. Just as, hey, Brisker's had a lot of concussions. Kevin Byard is
32 years old next year too.
Yeah, so he doesn't realistically have a ton of seasons left. He's not going to be our long-term guy. So safety is something I look at too. So safety or corner for number 4, but I'm going with corner just because I'm not feeling. I don't know. I'm not feeling too great about Stevenson right now.
Yeah, the next 5 games, I'm actually writing an article on Bear Goggles On about, a couple of players or, the storylines. And actually I did put, Stevenson and Smith has to be one of those guys who has to finish strong. Obviously Stevenson was caught trying to trip Jameson Williams on the sideline. And then, Williams tossed the ball on his face and got the penalty. So there is a little, some immaturity and, the regression that is completely real with Stevenson. And, Brown obviously won't tolerate with that kind of shit. So hopefully, Stevenson get his act together in the next 5 games to at least, point in the right direction for next year. Obviously, such a, a bad and negative influence that the whole Hail Mary game had on everybody. It certainly did not help with Matt Eberflus not taking more accountability on that previous play that led to the Hail Mary as well there. For the offensive line, we hear so many good names out there. Will Campbell from LSU declared himself today. Kevin Banks is also there. Out of the 2, who is your favorite player and who fits the Bears?
So currently I have Will Campbell slightly ahead of Kelvin Banks. I think it's really close between the 2. Just going off of playing tape, I feel like Banks is the more seamless fit at tackle just because, seems to have longer arms. But I think Campbell's tape is just a little bit better as a technician. I think the power is a little bit better. I think the hand usage is a little bit better. The spatial awareness is a little better.
Right.
Banks, I think, is a better athlete, and I think because of that longer arms and that longer reach, he's going to have more range as a tackle. So I could very well see Banks getting drafted before if people see Campbell as a guard. I like them both. I love either one of them on the Bears. I think Campbell is, more likely of the 2 to play at guard than Banks is. I think whoever drafts Banks is going to have him as a tackle. So whether that's, whether that's Tennessee, whether that's New England or, any of the other teams that are picking that high, I think they'll have Banks as a tackle. But yeah, time will tell in that capacity, but I really like both of them. I just have Campbell with the slight edge right now.
Mm-hmm. I am so bad at the names. My apologies. I'm sure you probably who know who I'm referring to. Jonah Savaiinaea of Arizona. Is he like a versatile enough to play either a tackle or guard where you could probably put him at guard and then move him to, say, right tackle or left tackle, or is he strictly a guard in your opinion?
So, I think he could play right tackle. I think that, honestly, I see a lot of comparisons to Darnell Wright coming out of college. I think that, in terms of build, they're very powerful, stocky guys who can move better than many people expect for, around that 330-pound range. Mm-hmm. Neither of them have super long arms. And I think that's something that, Wright is a good starting tackle. I think the thing that's stopping him from being great right now is sometimes he gives up, the leverage battle with, length. Mm-hmm. And I think that's something where I'm like, okay, I can point to Savaiinaea having similar issues at the next level if he stays at tackle. I like him at guard. And he's someone else that, like, late first, early second, I'd be all over. The comparison I keep using is his former Arizona teammate, Jordan Morgan, got drafted late in the first round by the Packers this past year. And I think, at least off of tape, I have a higher grade on Savaiinaea than I did off of Morgan. So I think just by that logic, I feel like he should be, a top 25 pick. Will he be? I don't know. I think that's, a lot of that's going to come down to the personal evaluations and then, team need and stuff like that. But yeah, I think Savaiinaea is a really good player for sure.
Mm-hmm. A couple of tackles I'm curious about. Josh Connolly with Oregon and Aronton Ursary with Minnesota. Which one of the two do you like the most for the Bears?
You see, that's tough because I like them both for two very different reasons.
Okay.
I think Connerly moves really well. I think at least on tape, he's got some of the better footwork and just, lateral quickness that I've seen for an offensive lineman in this class. Ursary, I think, is much more of a power guy. And I think he moves well for his size. The size adjusted athleticism is good. That doesn't necessarily mean he's an elite athlete for all offensive tackles necessarily. Right. But what I think he doesn't have in elite explosiveness, he makes up for with his power. He makes up for with his length, with his tenacity. When he locks, gets his hands set, when he locks down in on you, it's very tough to shed a block against him. So I think Ursary is going to be picked first out of those two. I think Connerly might be a better fit for the Bears just because he's a little bit better in space. But I think that especially if you're a gap-heavy team, you're going to love Ursary. If you're someone who likes to run the ball, then you'll like Ursary a lot. So, they're both talented players. I just think Ursary is going to go a little bit higher.
Would you take Tyler Booker in the first round? Is that too much for a guard?
I wouldn't say that's too much for a guard. I just have to figure out if that's too much for Tyler Booker because I think he's got all the tools in the world, and I'm really happy that he shed like the 20, 30 pounds, whatever it was from last year. I think he looks more nimble. He was a good athlete for 350 last year, but still I think he needed to get down to that 320, 330 range. Looks the part. He's strong. He's nimble. I just think the technique isn't quite there yet for him to be a round one guy. I think he's someone with a very high ceiling because, when he gets his pads right, when he gets his hands right, when he diagnoses properly, he can be a very, very good starting guard in the NFL. I just think that, the speed of the game as from a processing perspective and from a muscle memory of how to use your hands could be a little rough to him. I have Booker as a day 2 guy right now, so I wouldn't just off of that. I wouldn't take him in round 1. He's got a very high ceiling. I wouldn't be surprised if he develops into being the best interior offensive lineman in this class.
Okay.
Whether or not I don't necessarily think that's going to be the case in year 1 though.
Okay. If he's there at round 2, say with the Carolina pick, wherever it might be, you would take him, right?
Yeah, sure. I'd at the very least consider him for sure. I think that's about good for him.
Now, UGA has a very good trio of offensive linemen: Tate Ratledge, Steve Fairchild, and center, I believe, Jonah Wilson. Out of the 3, who do you think would be looking who would look good in a Bears uniform from a schematic perspective?
Yeah, so I'm looking at the Georgia offensive line, and it's a really good unit, and they also have tackles, Ernest Green, Xavier Truss. I think those are both NFL guys as well. But it's the interior that really shines there. I think Wilson's probably the best fit, just because he has that. He has center guard versatility. Obviously he plays center this year for Georgia, but plays significant. He's played a decent amount of reps at right guard, I believe it was. I think that his breakout this year as the replacement in Georgia's offensive line for Cedric Van Pran-Granger has been impressive. I think that in spurts last year, you can see the power, you can see the tenacity, but I really think that as a technician, he's gotten better. I don't think he's an elite center prospect by any means. Again, he's probably another day 2 guy. I think that in an ideal world, you can trade back from one of those round 2 picks, net a 4th or something, and still get Jared Wilson, or in the in the middle of the 2nd round or something like that. Whether or not it goes that high, I don't know, because it seems like the value of centers around the NFL and the draft is all over the place.
Yeah.
I feel like, if you've got Creed Humphrey going in late round 2 with the tape and the testing numbers that he had, it's kind of crazy. So I don't really know where any of these guys are going to go. But I think Wilson will be a really good fit. You play him at center. If not, he's got that guard ability as well. You could have him, if you want to bring Coleman Shelton back on a 1-year deal, have him compete with Jared Wilson, and then, or have Wilson compete for a guard spot, whatever the case may be. I think he's someone who could eventually develop into just a reliable, solid starter, which I think that's something Chicago could use.
Mm-hmm. Let's move on to the defensive side quickly. Three technique has been a massive problem. Obviously, I don't know if Eberflus's defense would have been any better or different with a legit three technique tackle. With the new staff coming in, do you think that's still a need? And if so, who are some of the names that people need to pay attention with the playoffs and the bowl season coming up?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that's still something you have to consider because, I think Javon Dexter has had a really good year.
Mm-hmm.
I also think, at least from a pass rushing perspective, I think he's better as a one technique than he is as a three technique, just because, he's athletic, but the get off can still be a little bit delayed with him sometimes. So he's not as explosive penetrating the backfield on a consistent basis. Which is why I think he does really well as a one tech. He can use that length to squeeze past the gaps and then close in on a quarterback in space. My top guy right now, my top defensive tackle is Mason Graham from Michigan.
Right.
I think him as a three technique really wherever, but I think the three technique is where he's really going to shine. Mm-hmm. He's explosive. He keeps a low center of gravity. I think he's powerful. He uses his hands really well. He's got a deep arsenal of pass rushing moves, but he's also spatially aware against the run. And I think that's something that is really underrated, is not only having the physical tools, but knowing when and how to shed and to stack and shed blocks and disengage. I think that's something where Dexter and Billings, as good as they can be against the pass rush, not all the way there as run defenders. Billings having a little bit of shorter arms, it's tougher for him to have that much reach to work with. But yeah, Graham's a guy I'm looking at. I think Walter Nolan in round 2 potentially out of Ole Miss is someone who's always had really good physical tools to me, but I've been impressed with how he's developed as a technician against the run this year. Mm-hmm. Kenneth Grant, I think, is a little bit more of a one tech type of guy. I have him in like that. Like a Don Terry Poe type of guy.
Oh, okay.
But, he's a very good run stuffer, very powerful. I think he's going to test incredibly well for his size. Mm-hmm. Deion Walker as well out of Kentucky. Mm-hmm. I think the sheer size that he has, the quickness for a guy that big, it's potentially unfair. I think that, it's steep to point to a guy and be like, hey, I think this is the next Dexter Lawrence. I don't necessarily know if that's going to be the case. I think, Lawrence was also really good coming out of college. But Walker's got the tools to do it. He's big, he's length, he's got good arm length, he's quick, he's powerful, he eats up a lot of space. Mm-hmm. I don't think he's as refined as a Kenneth Grant or a Mason Graham in terms of, knowing how to stack and shed, but I think just the physical attributes are out of this world.
Sure.
And one other guy I'll bring up too, Derek Harmon out of Oregon, someone I think, maybe a little bit more of a pass rushing type of guy, but his development this year has been really good. I think the quickness.
I believe he's a Michigan State transfer, right?
Yeah. So he, came over from Michigan State. He's been killing it at Oregon this year.
Right.
Another guy's got the speed and the length and the explosiveness and the raw power proportion well throughout his frame. I think he's someone who's going to go round 1. So those are a couple guys, some of my top defensive tackles in the class. There are a couple other guys as well who fit maybe a little bit more into that like traditional nose tackle range. Mm-hmm. But as far as three techs outside of Kenneth Grant that I mentioned, it's really for three techs, it's really Graham, Harmon, Walter, and then I also really like Omar Norman Lott out of Tennessee as well. Mm-hmm. As who's on my board the last few weeks.
Okay. Let's do some lightning round. I know we got a couple of questions.
Yeah.
Let's see. Do you like any of the Iowa State players?
Yeah. So Iowa State, I think they've got a good wide receiver tandem this year. Mm-hmm. These last couple weeks been able to catch up on, Jaden Higgins, just a big body who's got that inside outside versatility. I think he's just a solid complementary starting receiver at the next level. Jalen Knoll maybe, a little bit shiftier, a little bit quicker out of his breaks, not as big. But again, I think another guy is like a high-end wide receiver 3. Maybe, maybe a decent wide receiver 2 is his ceiling. I think either one of those guys could eventually start in the league. Jalen Travis is somebody that I watched when he was at, I want to say it was Princeton. I don't have my notes in front of me, but he transferred over to Iowa State.
Yeah.
I remember him being really toolsy as well. So those are a couple guys that I liked. And then Darian Porter is a corner out of Iowa State as well. Insane length, ball skills, quickness. I think he's pretty raw and he's a little lanky, but I think the tools are there for him to, develop into something down the line for sure.
He had another question. Top center in the draft, and this is also somebody, Scott C. from Iowa, obviously, with an Iowa bias. Logan Jones, center, is a must-get in round 2. So we mentioned Wilson from Georgia, Logan Jones, and I'll probably have to mention Parker Brailsford from Alabama. Those are probably the top 3 centers, right?
Yeah, those are my top 3 centers. Right now, it's in the order of Brailsford, Wilson, Jones. But admittedly, I have a little bit more of all those guys to watch. I think that honestly, I have them all around mid to late, probably like early round 3, I think is it's probably the grade that I'll end up having on, most of those guys. It's just going to be a matter of exactly what the order is going to be that I feel like it could be a little bit more fluid. I think Brailsford looked really good at Washington. He's been able to pick up some weight. I don't think he's ever going to be the biggest guy in the world, but he can move really well. Logan Jones, I mean, I don't like to be like, scout the player. I always say scout the player, not the helmet, but, it helps when you go to a school like Iowa that's, pretty consistently well coached. I think that you take a look at him, there's, explosiveness there, in terms of his quickness off the ball, his power, the way he turns his legs when he's locked up with a guy, can push them off the ball. I know he made it onto the freaks list that Bruce Feldman has over at The Athletic. I don't remember all the testing, but I remember seeing like his agility testing and squats or whatever were through the roof. So, I mean, I like all those guys. I don't think they're like elite prospects by any means. I think in Jones's case, I want to see a little bit more technical refinement in how he uses his hands, like the timing and the accuracy and stuff like that. But, there's potential there for sure.
Xavier Watts, thoughts on him as a safety? He and Malachi Starks from Georgia. Those are obviously the top 2 guys on that position, right?
Yeah. So I don't really understand. It seems like the national draft media isn't insanely high on Watts, which I just don't get. I mean, he's been super productive. He's versatile. He's the type of guy, he can play as a safety, as a linebacker. He can play out of the slot, in the box, deep safety, wherever you need him. Intelligent guy, really good ball skills. I think he moves well. I don't know if he's going to test elite, but he's fluid and he plays his ass off, which I love. He's prone to missed tackles from time to time, but I think he's a guy who's got very good, like high-end starting safety value. I'd take him in round 2. I don't know if he goes that high. I think there are a couple other really good safeties in this class as well. Malachi Starks from Georgia is a guy you mentioned. Nick Imanwori, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, South Carolina.
Yeah, the big guy.
Yeah.
225 or something like that, right?
He's a monster. He's huge. And I always go into these guessing on the pronunciations because whenever I'm watching a player, it's either the All-22, which doesn't have sound, or I'm watching back a YouTube replay, but I always have the audio off and I'm listening to some sort of music or something while I'm doing that. So Imanwari, I don't know. He's really good. Kevin Winston Jr. from Penn State's another guy that I have pretty highly there. But those are my top 4 guys. The order might change, but I don't think that those guys in the top 4 is going to change.
Okay, I'm going to end this stream. By the way, I appreciate everybody for joining. Almost 1,500 people joining, and I really, really appreciate this. Really, an amazing time with Jacob Infante from Windy City Gridiron. Obviously, the question that I have that I think a lot of people are thinking of is who is your, first of all, who is your QB1 and how would you rank them right now?
So this one's tough because I'm not a huge fan of this quarterback class.
Thank God the Bears aren't picking.
Yeah, compared to last year, like I've gone on the record saying I think Bo Nix coming out of Oregon would have been the QB1 in this class. Wow. And he's someone who, when he went like 12th overall, people were stunned. It's like, oh, that's a day 2 guy. What's he doing that early? Yeah. But I think you have Bo Nix in this class, and he's pushing for the number 1 pick just by comparison. So that's not to say that these guys are bad because, clearly if, Bo Nix is playing well these last few weeks. So, if one of these guys can play sort of close to that level, it's encouraging. But right now I have it as Cam Ward, number 1 out of Miami. I think that his growth from Miami, Washington State, from, going all the way back to Incarnate Word when he played at the FCS level, he's produced everywhere. He's always had a good arm. He's always been a good athlete with a good frame. Yeah. I think his deep ball touch has gotten better over the years, which I think is encouraging. He's almost a little too cool in the pocket. He's very composed. I'd like to see him play. It's almost like with a little bit more of a sense of urgency. And I think that in a more quick developing offense, I think that's where the learning curve is going to be, but he's got the tools to be a starter in the NFL. I've got
Shedeur Sanders.
So I don't have Sanders as my number 2. Mm-hmm. I have him actually as my number 4 right now.
Oh, okay.
So Quinn Ewers, I have as number 2 out of Texas. I just think that out of those top guys, he's got the highest ceiling in terms of what he brings with arm talent, the creativity, maybe not as, mentally refined as, some other guys in this class, but I think that he's definitely shown some improvements in terms of the decision-making he makes with the ball, some of the touch down the field. Garrett Nussmeier out of LSU is my number 3.
Okay.
He's someone I've been really impressed with. Dating back to, I think it was 2 years ago, he filled in for Jaden Daniels in a bowl game, and I came away, there are a couple throws, and I'm like, all right, this is, these are some really good plays he's making. I think, I'd say he's got the best pocket awareness in the class. I think he's a good decision maker, he's an accurate passer. The question is, does he have the arm strength or the athleticism that a team's going to be willing to take a shot on in the top 10? I don't know. And I don't think that, that was a similar knock on Burrow. He didn't have, he had a good, not great arm. He was a decent, but not elite athlete. I think it's similar with Nussmeier. I think that Burrow, clearly is better on tape. Yeah. But Nussmeier's got some tools to work with. I don't know if he's got the highest ceiling, but I'd argue he might have the highest floor out of any quarterback in this class. And then Sanders is 4. I think that he's someone I'm impressed. I think he's going to go higher than where I have him ranked on my board. I think I come away impressed with the accuracy, the toughness, the resiliency to get obliterated on every single week and still be fighting and still be making some of these impressive throws. Yeah. I think he's got a good arm. Again, part of it comes down, it's sort of a similar to Nussmeier. I don't know how high the ceiling is. I think that he doesn't have the pocket presence of Nussmeier where, I think Sanders thinks he's more athletic than he actually is. He's not a bad athlete, but I think, he holds onto the ball a little bit too long. He gets into that, scrambler mode that, some people knocked Caleb for. I know other quarterbacks have been knocked for that in the past, but I don't think Shedeur is as fast or as agile as some of those guys. Again, he's someone I think could be a good starter. I think he can be a good point guard type distributor, a good game manager, and I think that there's a lot of value in that. Yeah. The question is he going to want to be that? I think that's the one thing that needs to be answered. I mean, obviously, I'm not in there speaking with him. I'm not in there talking with his coaches. So Any speculation that I have is purely that speculation. And at the end of the day, the NFL teams are going to make decisions based off of, intel that's a lot sharper than what I have. But just going off the tape, he's another guy I think could be good.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't know if he's going to be great, if that makes sense. And
right. I hear you.
I can't look at any of these guys and be like, oh, Caleb Williams has superstar potential. Drake May has superstar potential. Jaden Daniels has superstar potential. I'd say even Penix and McCarthy.
Yeah.
I came away more impressed with than some of these guys. Not to say that not to say all of them are bad. I don't think the top guys are bad. I think even Jalen Milroe, with his pure arm talent and his athleticism, as rocky as his play can be sometimes, I think there's a lot to like there.
Sure.
Carson Beck, as tough as things have been for him down the stretch with interceptions, he's also put together some really good stuff on tape. So
yeah,
I don't know. It's a crazy.
It's a crapshoot.
It's a crapshoot. I wouldn't feel comfortable having to make a decision, like putting my job on the line as a general manager for any of these quarterbacks.
Yeah.
It's a lot of, it's the draft. It's a lot of what ifs regardless, but I feel like especially this year, just so much up in the air. I don't know. I have no idea who's going to go where. And I think that's kind of exciting as a neutral party whose team isn't going to be drafting a quarterback in the first round this year. I'm just interested to see the chaos.
Yeah, that's true. And finally, Ashton Jeanty. I know in any other year, he probably would be winning a Heisman, perhaps. And I think he deserves to get out, maybe a lot more votes. I'm sure Travis Hunter might be the runaway winner at this point, unfortunately. But is Jeanty a top 15 pick in your opinion, or is that too much?
I think he should be. And I look at it as, Bijan Robinson was a top 10 pick coming out of Texas. And I think Bijan was a little bit better of a pass catcher, a little bit better on passing downs than Jeanty. Maybe a little bit more top speed. But I think that Jeanty maximizes what he has better than Bijan does. I think that, the vision's incredible. The contact balance is, really, really good. The short area burst is very good. Breakaway speed is good. Shifty runner. He's the type of guy who can make you miss in the open field. I think you're going to hear a lot of Jahmyr Gibbs comparisons with him.
Okay.
How tough they both run. Like, Jeanty's not the biggest guy. Like, he's got a pretty good build, but he's not like 230 pounds, 6'2" or anything like that.
Right. He ain't Derrick Henry for sure. Yes.
Yeah, definitely.
Like 5'8", 5'9" around that time.
Yeah. But and like going to that height, the one thing he does have going for him is that low center of gravity, and that makes him, the way he runs so low to the ground, he's so tough to bring down, and he's so powerful in his lower body, and he's so tough. For the Bears, I don't know, but someone should take him in the top 15. I think I don't have the current draft order in front of me right now.
Yeah.
But I'm pretty sure Dallas is, as if the season were to end right now, Dallas will be in the top 15. I'd take him in a heartbeat if I'm the Cowboys. I think
he's from Frisco, where I happen to live there, and where Cowboys are actually located in that area. So it would be a match made in heaven, homecoming. It all makes sense for the Dallas Cowboys to.
Oh yeah.
Take him. I mean, they've taken Ezekiel Elliott in the number 4, I believe, back in 2016. So it's not unusual for them to draft a running back that high. So
yeah, I know. And if you want to do Cleveland there too, even, I mean, looking for a replacement for Nick Chubb, I think Jeanty there. I don't think the Bears would take him. I did pull up the order and looking. 49ers probably, wouldn't with McCaffrey. The Colts wouldn't with Jonathan Taylor.
Yeah.
Arizona could be interesting. I don't think they'd rush to a running back, but when you have a team when you have a player like Jeanty, I feel like you have to start making some exceptions. And if you're going best player available, I mean, I think any pick after 6 or 7, you can make the argument Jeanty's the best player on the board. If you don't, factor in positional value however you want, he's just a damn good football player.
Mm-hmm. Indeed. Well, listen, Jacob, I really appreciate your time for doing this for over an hour, and I apologize for the technical glitch, for the delay and everything. But I really appreciate everybody for asking questions, and really, I'm sorry we couldn't get to all of them regarding the coaching and as well as the position. I know Nicholas was very active asking for linebackers and stuff like that. So, I'm looking forward to having you on again, maybe January or February, when we all know what the Bears have, as who is their new head coach, what can we expect from the new staff, what kind of players that they're going to be looking for, etc. And then we'll probably dive deeper into the position of need for the Bears, and then comparing the strength and weakness of the overall 2025 NFL draft. Make sure to follow Jacob on X at Jacob Infante, one full word, and you could also follow his work. Wonderful work on WindyCityGridiron and WindyCityGridiron.com. Thank you very much for your time, Jacob, and happy holidays to you and your family. And I look forward to having you on again very, very soon, maybe just around late January or maybe February, to discuss more about the Bears and the draft as well. And I also thank everybody for asking all kinds of questions and keeping us engaged, and hopefully you will join us again for another live stream edition of the Double 18 podcast, live stream edition. Thank you, Jacob, and we'll hope to have you on again very soon.
No, I appreciate that, Stephen. Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much for those who joined us tonight, and we look forward to having you on again for the next live edition. Good night, everybody.